World War II was not only the deadliest conflict in human history, it was also the stage for some of the most ambitious and terrifying experiments in military technology. As Allied forces advanced, they discovered secret German laboratories hidden in mountains, underground bunkers stretching for miles, and blueprints for weapons that seemed ripped straight from science fiction. These so-called Wunderwaffe, Hitler's wonder weapons, were designed to crush his enemies, terrify civilians, and turn the tide of a war Germany was already losing. But how close did Nazi Germany really come to changing the course of history with these secret superweapons? To answer this, we must step back to the final years of the war. By 1943, Germany's dream of a quick victory was collapsing. The Eastern Front had swallowed millions of soldiers. The Allies had landed in North Africa and were preparing to invade Europe. Supplies were running low. And yet, Hitler remained obsessed with a single idea. If Germany could unleash a revolutionary weapon, one beyond the imagination of his enemies, he could still achieve victory. From jet-powered aircrafts to supersonic rockets, from giant super tanks to the terrifying atomic ambitions of the Reich, Hitler ordered his scientists to create weapons so advanced that they could strike fear into entire nations. This is the story of those secret projects. We begin with the weapon that terrorized the streets of London, the world's first long-range guided missile, the V-2 rocket. By 1943, Hitler knew that Germany was running out of time. The Allies had begun heavy bombing raids on German cities, destroying factories, oil refineries, and railway lines. The Luftwaffe, once feared as the most powerful air force in the world, had been crippled by relentless attacks. Hitler's answer was something no one had ever seen before: a new class of weapons designed not just to kill soldiers on the battlefield, but to break the morale of entire nations. He called them Vergeltungswaffen, or vengeance weapons. The world would come to know them as the V-1 flying bomb and the V-2 rocket. The V-1 was a terrifying sight. A small, pilotless jet aircraft launched from a ramp in occupied Europe. Its engine made a chilling buzzing sound, like a mechanical wasp in the sky. The British soon nicknamed it the Doodlebug. For civilians in London, the sound was unmistakable. As long as you could hear the buzzing, you were safe. But when the engine cut out, silence followed. And in those seconds of silence, everyone knew what was coming next: an explosion. Between June 1944 and March 1945, more than 30,000 V-1 flying bombs were launched against Britain. Nearly 10,000 reached their targets, killing over 6,000 people and injuring tens of thousands more. But Hitler wanted something even more destructive. Something unstoppable. That was the V-2 rocket. The V-2 was the world's first long-range ballistic missile, a weapon decades ahead of its time. It was faster than the speed of sound. Once launched, it traveled over 3,500 miles per hour, reaching altitudes of more than 60 miles above Earth, before crashing down on its target at nearly 4 times the speed of sound. Unlike the V-1, there was no warning, no buzzing engine, no chance to hide. By the time you heard it, it had already hit. The first V-2 struck London on September 8, 1944. The explosion destroyed houses and shops, killing 3 people instantly, and within months, thousands more would die in these rocket attacks. The Allies had no defense. Anti-aircraft guns couldn't reach it. Fighter planes couldn't catch it. Churchill himself admitted, "The V-2 made no noise until the explosion," and by then, it was too late. But the true horror of the V-weapons wasn't just in their power. It was in how they were built. Hidden deep underground in the Harz Mountains of Germany, the Nazis constructed a vast tunnel complex called Mittelwerk. Here, thousands of prisoners from the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp were forced to work in inhuman conditions, building rockets day and night. Prisoners were starved, beaten, and executed if they slowed down. More people died constructing the V-2 than were ever killed by its explosions. For every rocket that reached London or Antwerp, hundreds of innocent lives were lost in those dark tunnels. Yet, despite the destruction, the V-weapons failed to achieve their true purpose. They did not break British morale. In fact, they had the opposite effect. The people of London grew more determined than ever to resist. Even worse for Hitler, the massive resources poured into these weapons drained Germany's war effort elsewhere. Factories focused on rockets instead of tanks. Skilled engineers were diverted from aircraft production. The V-1 and V-2 were terrifying, yes, But they were also a desperate gamble, a gamble that ultimately failed. And yet, these weapons changed history forever. The V-2 rocket, in particular, became the blueprint for modern missile technology. After the war, both the Americans and the Soviets raced to capture German scientists and their designs. One of those scientists was Wernher von Braun, the mastermind behind the V-2. Instead of facing trial for war crimes, he was secretly taken to the United States under Operation Paperclip, where he later became the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket, the very rocket that carried American astronauts to the moon. So in a strange twist of fate, Hitler's wonder weapon, designed to destroy cities, became the foundation of humanity's journey into space. But the V-weapons were only the beginning. Hitler's imagination went far beyond rockets. His scientists were working on massive tanks, jet fighters, and even plans for nuclear weapons. The question is, could any of these have changed the outcome of the war if they had been completed in time? While the world was still flying propeller-driven aircraft, Nazi Germany shocked the Allies by introducing something that seemed to belong to the future: the Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. Nicknamed the Schwalbe, or Swallow, this jet was years ahead of anything the Allies had. It could fly at speeds of over 500 miles per hour, nearly 150 miles per hour faster than the best Allied fighters. With its twin jet engines and devastating firepower, the Me-262 could rip apart bomber formations before the enemy even had time to react. Some German pilots claimed that, if enough Me-262s had been built earlier, they could have swept Allied bombers from the skies and changed the course of the air war. But Hitler had his own vision. Instead of using the jet as a fighter to defend German skies, he insisted it be converted into a blitz bomber, capable of attacking cities and ground targets. This delay, combined with fuel shortages, sabotage from forced laborers, and relentless Allied bombing of German factories, meant that fewer than 300 Me-262s ever saw combat. For the Allies, it was a terrifying glimpse of what the future of warfare might look like. But for Germany, it was too little, too late. Hitler's obsession with giant, fearsome machines didn't stop with the skies. On land, his engineers designed tanks so massive they defied imagination. The most infamous was the Maus, German for mouse. An ironic name, because this was the heaviest tank ever built in history. Weighing nearly 200 tons, the Maus was so huge that no bridge could support its weight, and it could barely move faster than a walking man. It carried a massive 128mm gun capable of destroying any Allied tank at extreme range. But it also consumed fuel at a staggering rate, and its sheer size made it a slow-moving target for enemy aircraft. Only 2 prototypes were ever completed before the war ended. Yet Hitler wanted to go even bigger. Plans were drawn for the Landkreuzer P-1000 Ratte, a tank so colossal it was practically a battleship on land. At over 1,000 tons, armed with battleship-sized naval guns and measuring over 35 meters long, the Ratte would have been unstoppable, if it could move at all. In reality, it was an engineering nightmare. Its weight would have crushed roads, it could never cross bridges, and it would have been an easy target for Allied bombers. The project was canceled before a prototype was built, but the very fact that it was considered shows the level of Hitler's obsession with wonder weapons. The tragedy was that while German scientists and engineers were designing revolutionary technology, the resources to actually use them simply didn't exist. Fuel shortages crippled the Luftwaffe. Allied bombing raids destroyed factories before mass production could begin, and the sheer scale of these super projects meant they drained resources away from weapons that might have made a real difference. The Me-262 jet could have transformed the air war. The Maus could have terrified Allied tank divisions, but in the end, these machines existed more as symbols of Hitler's desperation than as practical tools of war. Still, they left behind an enduring legacy. The Me-262 inspired the next generation of jet fighters. The Maus became the blueprint for modern ideas of heavy armor, and the sheer ambition of projects like the Ratte demonstrated how far Hitler was willing to push the limits of science and engineering in pursuit of his vision of victory. But Hitler's obsession didn't end with tanks and planes. He had